This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everyone. Once again, my guest is Bree Lafferty. Bree, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you again for having me.
You had such a unique and detailed, really incredible near-death experience, and we covered a lot of that in part one, and I'll have a link to that in the description for all of you that are listening and watching. But I have so many more questions for you because it seems like we've only touched on just a little bit of what was a really fascinating experience. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is when you got to this place, it didn't feel like heaven, but it also was filled with love. And so why did you not think it was heaven? And where exactly did you think you were?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I am very adamant that it was not heaven, that it was not what I believe is heaven, even though I strongly believe there is a heaven or heaven-like place. I think, especially in my experience of being in other dimensions through involuntary astral travel, which I briefly touched on last time, it was more of a holding space. So it was of a higher vibrational density. It wasn't hell either, absolutely far from it. And it was just kind of a holding space or a waiting area, if that makes sense. And I feel like when the beings were passing through the fence onto the land bridge, that they possibly were entering heaven or a similar place that was of higher vibration. This one, I hear experiences that are just so bright and vivid, and the music is undescribable. And I just didn't experience those types of emotions or experiences. Mine was just very matter of fact, if that makes sense. So it was full of love and curiosity and joy, but it was more like these people or beings were just kind of going through the motions. I definitely believe that there are higher places and higher dimensions and places that are heaven-like and just absolutely indescribable. And the closest you get to describing it is these beautiful marble and these beams that shine so bright that you can't see them, and musical that is unworldly. And here I didn't hear any music, and I didn't, see any amazing colors other than my tunnel. And it was a denser area, but nowhere near as dense as Earth.
One of my guests, Peter Panagore, talked about levels even beyond what you were just mentioning with that very heaven-like experience. It sounds like there's so many dimensions. My recent guest, Dr. Lottie Valentine, said when she was where she ended up, she definitely felt there were levels above her and levels below her. So do you think it was something like that, where there's just so many different dimensions and levels of this heavenly place?
Absolutely. I knew there were higher levels for sure. And that's what I mean by, I guess, higher vibrations and higher levels of density and lower ones. In my astral travels, I experienced very dark and dense places that were in between Earth and where I was too. But I had this knowing that there were other levels, higher levels, different levels. Heck, in my experience, I had been in 5 different types of areas and dimensions. I mean, the void was completely different from the white area with the master teacher, which was completely different than my tunnel, which was way different than my experience with other beings, and then where I ended up the last place with the scroll. I mean, everything was so drastically different that they were all different dimensions. And that was just, I'm sure, a small, tiny little bit of, I'm sure, of infinite, dimensions and areas.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about some of these various places that you were. One thing I found that was interesting is when you were these other beings, one of the places was like a grocery store, and they were kind of human-like or earth-like would be a better word, not human. In terms of, you imagine heaven being so exotic, but these were very relatable things that you went through, although definitely there were other parts of them that were unlike Earth.
Yeah, it was very Earth-like. I think that is a great description. The scenery, reminded me a lot of Earth, kind of like a cityscape. I mean, I severed my arm on a pole that would resemble like an electric pole here. Of course, with the added additions that thoughts happened instantly, and I had three different types of bodies, and there was things happening faster than telepathy. But the overall look of this place was very much reminiscent of Earth.
And it was interesting, some of the things that occurred to you. For example, you were learning how to fly. I thought it was interesting that it was challenging to learn how to fly and that you did run into a pole, you severed your arm, which immediately came back. But I always think of heaven as kind of being perfect. And I guess you said you weren't quite in heaven, but why do you think you were shown that kind of an experience?
So I think in reflection, I ended up in that experience. One, it was safe. It was free of the pain and the suffering and the fear I'd been experiencing on Earth for 16 years. So I think it was a holding place that possibly showed me that I can have a similar experience. Like we just mentioned, it was reminiscent of Earth, but without all of the negative vibrations. So it could have been a way to show me that it's also possible to experience these things on Earth.
That's what I was going to ask you too. Were these lessons for you to bring back? For example, you were a snowman and you thought about, gee, I wonder what would happen if I got near that flame. And then instantly you're near that flame and you melted. So is that teaching us that our thoughts here on Earth, although not quite as quickly, but they are creating our reality?
Oh, absolutely. So now that I've deviated away from working in construction and the typical corporate America job, working the corporate ladder, I've gone into death and spiritual doula, and a part of that is being a coach, especially for people who are trying to break free from chronic illness. And the reason I bring that up is because one of the things I'm sure I am super annoying at is how powerful our thoughts are. Our thoughts are creation. Our thoughts do create our reality. It might take more time, especially because our thoughts are creating reality in the quantum, or this darkness, this endless possibilities. Our emotions bring it to us. So if we think something fearful or scary or something that gives us anxiety, and we have that strong emotional response of fear, we bring it to us faster. But the same happens when you think these positive thoughts. So, creating health, for example, since that's my example, you think about your future, your healthy future, and then you feel that gratitude and love for it. That powerful emotion makes it happen faster. So 100% was a lesson in how powerful our thoughts are. And actually, I'm thankful our thoughts do not happen as fast as over there, because as the snowman, I thought, well, what happens if I get too close to that and melt? Then it instantly happened. I got too close and I melted. So I'm grateful for the lag here. Of course, we all wish things would happen sooner when they're good. We're grateful for that they take time when it's bad. But learning how powerful our thoughts and our emotions are is a huge lesson that I harp on quite a lot.
And maybe a reinforcing lesson was the fact that you did feel like you were cured of this illness, but then you got back into your everyday routine and probably the same kind of mindset, and then it came back. So maybe that's all part of that bigger picture.
Oh, it was absolutely part of the big picture. I was miraculously cured. And by this time, I started hearing about other stories of NDErs who had been cured. I actually thought about maybe starting to share my story because of this miracle. And I went on Jeff Maher's podcast when he was still relatively small, but I was in corporate America, so I was glad he was small. And I shared that, my NDE had cured my incurable disorder. And then it came back because I was in the same thoughts and the same feelings as I was when I had the condition. So it absolutely recreated the condition. So I felt like a failure. I felt like a fraud. And I was really glad that no one knew who Jeff Mara was or that I had been on his podcast. And it wasn't until, 5-6 years later when I had gone through brain surgery and I started coming into the realization that my NDE did happen and that it was this powerful experience that I started looking into more metaphysical things and other ways of living and other ways of thinking, other ways of feeling. And that's when I was able to actually heal myself this time from this chronic illness and know for a fact that I can keep it away permanently by making sure my thoughts and my feelings don't go back. My identity does not go back to the past identity. And that was a huge lesson because I'm also know I'm here to help other people do the same and break free from not only chronic illness, but grief and trauma, depression, which depression is a chronic illness in my book, by just changing your thoughts and your feelings. It sounds so simple. It's really hard, but it is that simple.
And it's so hard to reprogram because I do think a lot of us, when we do get healthy, then we kind of start to bring those thoughts in again and we bring back conditions that we don't want. And then we're like, why are we always stuck with this? But, we don't realize we're doing a lot of that ourselves.
Yeah. And to that point, if you look up other healers and these amazing miracles in history and cultures and religions, usually the healer will tell the person that has healed to not go back to their old ways, to change their life, to change their thoughts and their feelings and sometimes their surroundings. Because if you go back to your old ways, the old condition that was initially healed can come back. And I am a living experience of that. It's just absolutely incredible that, our mind and our body run on 95% of subconscious programs by the time we're 35. And if you are not making an effort to create your future, your brain will instantly reset to what it knows. And what it knows is the past. And in the past lays those old conditions.
You're right. We can reprogram. It's just hard. And a lot of us don't put in the effort. So you're very correct. In meditation, you saw this binary code, which you also saw in your near-death experience, and you felt like your brain was being rewired and healed. So you saw the code. Did you understand the code?
Not at all. I couldn't just say, I couldn't read the code as if it was a language at all, which is another fascinating thing. Had I been a coder or working with binary code, maybe, but that's just never been a passion of my life. I also think while the tunnel did come and appear in my meditation, I believe it was more for me to know what was happening instead of it actually, I knew it was a rewiring of my brain, but the fact I saw it was more of a symbol. Just like, some people may have seen their brain actually rewiring in the meditation. For me, it was seeing that binary code from my tunnel that was a symbol to me that it was happening.
One thing that you discovered during your near-death experience is this oneness and unity that we all have. Can you tell us more about that?
I would love to. So that was another lesson that I know I was meant to bring here. And I feel like a lot of near-deathers and people who have spiritually transformative experiences will say the same thing, that we are all connected. We are divinely connected. We are all offshoots of this creator, this source, this God, living these independent experiences that send back information. But we are all so connected. We are so close to each other that it's just so fascinating to see how much we argue and hate and hurt because all we have is the skin sack that keeps us separate. we are so close and divinely intertwined. It is just fascinating to be a part of this human experience where we have forgotten that. And people with life reviews, which I did not have in my experience, they will see how their actions had such a profound experience, a profound impact on other people, whether negatively or positively. And they see the ripples of that. And that's not just because of the human experience, it's because we feel each other and we are each other. And we are collective. We are collectively together with our own consciousnesses, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Sure. You also, I believe, had trouble coming back. And I've heard other near-death experiencers say this too, where you're kind of shocked by the cruelty in the world.
Yeah. So the first year after this experience was extremely hard. Right when I got back, I didn't want to be back, and I tried everything to go to where I just was. I tried slowing my breath, relaxing my muscles, crying out again, and nothing got me back there. And so then, the next few days, months, up to a year, I was very confused. I came back feeling other people's pain, which I later heard is medical intuition. But at the time, it was like, I'm having all these weird pains, especially driving by car accidents. I could tell exactly where in their body they were hurt. If the seatbelt had, damaged, bruised them or lacerated them, they had whiplash. If they ended up transitioning out of this human life, I could feel it all. I could feel the energy of plants, and it was overwhelming. And I felt like I had been stuffed into a sausage casing. I was so uncomfortable in this body. Even though I wasn't experiencing symptoms of myoclonus dystonia, I was experiencing symptoms of being human. And it was so constricting. And you think about just being in all these fun different bodies and floating and flying and changing bodies and all this amazing, endless energy, and this energy body stuffed into something so tight and constraining. And walls were so dense. I kept touching walls, so confused because it was so dense. And it was also when I started doing more research into meditation that I realized that matter is just a slower form of energy. And our 3D world is the slowest form of energy. And that's why it's so hard and dense. But I didn't understand that then. I had no insight on the metaphysical world, the frequencies, energy, matter. I could care less about science. My whole goal was to be good at my job in construction. And I was a proposal writer. I had no clue what any of this was about. So it was terrifying. It was exhausting, and hearing people's thoughts and how hateful they were, and just knowing people were raised in racism and just hateful thoughts and hateful energies and hateful systems. It was so hard. I struggled very much. I became depressed, and I actually tried to take extreme measures to get back there. And luckily they were unsuccessful, and I kind of snapped out of it when I ended up with a traumatic brain injury from one of those extreme attempts. And I snapped out of it, realized I have to be here and I should make the best of it. And so that's how I ended up going back to my old life. I'm meant to be here. I don't know why. I obviously can't go back. So I guess I'll just keep doing what I know. And that's how I went back into my old identity. And it wasn't until brain surgery, recovering from that, and studying more about metaphysics and NDEs and the quantum meditation that I actually stepped into my life's purpose. But it took 5 or 6 years.
What you're describing, I find, is really interesting because you said, all of a sudden it was kind of shocking to come back to this world to see the cruelty. And I'd be really curious for those people that are listening and watching, and you can maybe add this to the comments, is if, they also are experiencing that. Because I feel like, having listened to so many of these near-death experiencers and talking to so many people like you, I feel like I've gained some of that, where there's this new empathy where I do sometimes, look at the outside world and I'm kind of surprised that something doesn't bother somebody else, because to me it seems kind of hurtful, and it just is kind of normal in society. And so anyway, I think that you can gain some of these perspectives without even having to go through what you've been through, just by listening to what you've been through.
Yeah, you can absolutely gain the perspectives. And what I've learned since then is learning how to not be consumed by the darkness and the hatefulness. Your thoughts are super powerful. What you seek is seeking you. What you resist persist. Two of my favorite quotes. So when you start, there's also, I want to point out confirmation bias. So when you start seeking out the beauty and the love in the world, you'll attract more beauty and love in the world. When seek out, or you get sucked into the news with the wars and the genocides and the trafficking, and I mean, you can go in a spiral with all the negative around the world. But when you observe that and you feel those emotions, you attract more of it, and you will seek out more of it, whether intentional or not. Social media is designed to keep you stuck into whatever is keeping you on social media. So is that negative or is that positive? Are you seeking out the love and the light in the world, or are you being sucked in by the density, the darkness, and the hatred?
So you were in a room with these, I believe, 7 amazing beings. Who do you think they were?
Yeah, so these beings were tall. They were, although I couldn't see them, I could feel the energy. They were tall and powerful, bodiless, just energy bodies of significant importance. Since my return to this human life, I've done some research, and I've had people even comment in YouTube comments who they thought these beings might be, and I've had great insight. I still don't know. I haven't, seen one been like, oh, yes, that's absolutely it. But some of the suggestions have been 7 pillars of light. I guess there are also 7 pillars of darkness. That comes from another near-deather who has experienced the 7 beings of light. Then, of course, 7 archangels that are, I believe, in the Christian religions. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out exactly who they were, what they were. They weren't as significant or powerful as the creator I met in the void, but they were more powerful and acknowledged higher than the ascended master that I had met in the white area with the numbers in the room. So it was somewhere in between a ascended master and God, but where in between, I don't know.
So talk about the creator that you met. You just mentioned that.
Yes. So often people will ask me, well, who is it? Or what does it look like? Is it a he? Is it a she? And it is so it is so beyond our human language. I commend religions for trying to describe this creator, this God, this entity, but it's beyond words. When I was in its presence, genderless, no, nothing negative. So it is the accompaniment of love. It is love's energy. It is all of creation. It was kind of, if you think of the cosmos, it felt like, just kind of a circulation of stars and energy. Even though I didn't see this, I had that feeling. And I just knew I was part of it, and that it was the thing that had answered my prayers. It was God. It was source. It was love. It was home. It was the thing that is always watching out for me, having my best interest at heart, letting me go play around as a soul, go have all different experiences. And, just, it's this big papa that you just know when you go home, you can sit on his lap and share a cup of cocoa, and there's no judgment. There was absolutely no judgment.
I had a recent guest, Jeff Riley, and he was saying that now when he prays, it's nice because he said, I met him, I met God. And so now I know it's not just like a picture of what we think God is, but, you actually have kind of a knowing, which is a real gift for people like you that have experienced God.
Yeah, I've actually been reflecting on this encounter for the last few weeks. Growing up, I believed in God and I believed in Jesus, and I went through the motions of being saved by Jesus Christ, the Savior, and praying to God, and yet I was still unsure. I was unsure if I did it right. There's all this talk of hell, and if you sin, yeah, you're saved, but if you're not saved, how do you know you're saved? You're going to hell, and all these, if you don't have the right religion. I think about all these other religions and people who had never heard of God. And why would they send them to hell without, even giving them access to the chance? It was such a crazy time in my life, as a young kid trying to do the right thing and being told I had to be saved and thinking I was saved, but not sure if I was. And then seeing other people who said they were saved on their deathbeds, not sure of where they're going. It was very, very confusing. And then I meet the creator and the God, and being in that presence and knowing that, there is no judgment. He's not going to be like, oh, you sinned. You went to earth to experience all these things, but you sinned and you're going to be damned forever. Also, what is eternity? If there is no time, how could there be eternity? Eternity is, forever, but forever is a time construct. So you can't end up in hell forever in eternity if there is no eternity. So coming back, I've also been questioned about my faith. And I just, I don't take it personally anymore. And I don't question myself anymore either. I was like, until you actually stand in the presence of God, until you are in that presence, how dare you question my faith, or not even how dare you, but it's laughable that you question my faith when I have been in the presence.
God is so much bigger than we as humans can understand in our own mind. And we try to put so many human conditions on God and project that onto God. And that's probably what turns off people and they become atheists. They're not rejecting God. They're rejecting this image of God that they've been taught.
Yeah. And, all the different images that are out there, it's hard to, of course, growing up, if you're not raised in a religious household and you hear about all these different gods and how different they are, of course, I can absolutely believe why you don't believe in the construct of God, believe in this entity that is so different across, different religions, or of course, than the bias of other religions we have. That's a huge role in history, is all the different biases. And once again, it's back to even our skin suits. We just love to put these shields up and these barriers and these constructs within constructs within constructs to try to go through this human experience, where in reality, when you're out of all the constructs, everything is just love and energy. It's incredible. It's oneness.
You felt this presence, God, this source. How certain are you that is real?
Absolutely, more than 100%. With every ounce of everything, I am more than 100% certain.
And Bree, with all of this that you saw and you experienced, what has been the most important thing that you've learned?
The most important thing is definitely the thoughts and feelings create your reality, and just utilize that in your relationships. Utilize that on your internet presence, in your physical presence. try to aim for those higher elevated emotions. If you can't feel love right now, try gratitude. It'll get you there.
That is great advice. Bree, I have a feeling a lot of people are going to want to connect with you. I believe you have a book as well. So can you share that with us and how people can learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, the easiest way to find out anything or connect with me is on my website, BRI0NICLLC.com. Of course, I had to throw some zero in there. And in that website, you can find my socials, which is Facebook and Instagram, where I post daily updates and inspiration. You can also find my 2 books that are out now and my 3rd one being released soon, and all the interviews I've been on. So it's a nice, convenient place for not only myself, but anyone else who wants to hear more on different versions of my, not versions, but different takes on my story.
And I will have links to all of that in the description. And before I ask you for some parting words, I just want to say too, to everybody that is listening right now, Bree and I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the things that we have talked about today. If you want to share some things that are similar that you have been through or experienced, we would love to hear that as well. And please, if you like this, it really helps the podcast if you give it a like, if you share it with your friends, and certainly subscribe. Bree, it has been great talking to you today. You've had so much wisdom that you've shared with us. Do you have some parting words that you can share with the folks that are listening and watching?
Yes, and thank you so much for having me on, Heather. It
It's
has
my
been
pleasure.
such an honor. I'm excited to connect with you at IANS coming up.
Yes,
My parting words is, just love and think those lovely thoughts, feel those lovely feelings, and you'll have a lovely future.
that is great advice. Thank you so much, Bree. It has been absolutely wonderful having you on my podcast. And thank you again, everybody, for watching and listening. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.